Atlas Prime was the largest military station I had ever seen. Its armored rings stretched across kilometers of space, housing fleets, training grounds, command centers, and soldiers from dozens of civilizations. Humans were still considered newcomers. We were useful engineers and technicians, but nobody in the coalition considered us exceptional warriors. That was why my assignment made no sense. I was Jake Miller, a human engineer and former soldier. My orders had been clear. Report to Valkyr 9. Valkyr 9 was an elite Veyra combat unit. It was also composed entirely of female warriors. When I entered their operations room, every conversation stopped. Commander Sarah Kane looked at my orders, then at me. You are a human engineer. Yes, Commander. You were assigned to Valkyr 9. Yes. Why? I assume Command made a mistake. A few warriors laughed. One of them, Sergeant Mia Brooks, stepped forward. She looked strong enough to bend armor with her hands. How long do you think you will survive our training? I don't know. You Aaron, afraid? I didn't say that. That stopped her smile for a moment. I looked around the room. Their armor was advanced, but I noticed several systems running inefficiently. I may not be your strongest fighter, I said calmly, but I know how to find problems other people overlook. Sarah studied me for several seconds. Until Command corrects this mistake, she said, you remain with Valkyr 9. I nodded. Understood. I had no idea then that the mistake would change the entire unit. The next morning, I discovered that Valkyr 9 had no intention of making my arrival comfortable. At 0600, I was standing on the training floor wearing standard coalition combat gear while 23 Veyra warriors watched from the observation line. Commander Kane stood among them. Basic combat evaluation, she said. I thought I was assigned as a technical specialist. You are. Then why am I being evaluated? Because you are here. That seemed difficult to argue with. Sergeant Mia Brooks stepped onto the floor. She was the warrior who had questioned how long I would survive. Up close, she was even more intimidating. She looked at my equipment, then at me. Human, yes? Try not to break anything. I'll do my best. She smiled. I wasn't talking about the equipment. The evaluation began. I lasted 37 seconds. Mia knocked my rifle away, swept my legs, and put me on the floor before I had time to react. The surrounding warriors laughed. I got back up. She knocked me down again. The third time, I stayed down long enough to catch my breath. Evaluation complete, Mia announced. I sat up. I assume I failed. You survived. That wasn't the question. She looked almost amused. No, you failed. I accepted that. Strength was never going to be my advantage against a Veyra. After training, I returned to the technical bay and examined Valkyr 9's equipment. Their armor was impressive. Their weapons were better. Their communication network, however, was a different matter. I connected my diagnostic unit. The system immediately produced 12 warning codes. I frowned. That can't be right. Mia appeared behind me. What? Your armor is wasting power. She folded her arms. Our armor is military grade. I know. You think you can improve it? I think someone already could have. I opened the distribution map. The problem was buried inside the power routing protocol. The system balanced energy according to an outdated coalition standard. During combat, every armor unit was compensating for the same inefficiency independently. It wasn't dangerous. It was simply wasteful. I looked at Mia. If I change this protocol, your armor should gain roughly 18% more usable power. She stared at me. Then she called Commander Kane. Within an hour, the entire unit was watching my test. The first modified suit activated. Its systems stabilized. Its shield held longer. The room became very quiet. For the first time since I had arrived, nobody laughed when I touched their equipment. The armor test changed the atmosphere inside Valkyr 9. Not completely. I was still the human engineer who had failed a basic combat evaluation. Nobody suddenly considered me a warrior. But they had stopped treating me like a mistake. Commander Kane ordered a second test. Then a third. Each time, the modified armor performed better than the original configuration. Shield endurance increased. Weapon cooling improved. Internal power fluctuations nearly disappeared. I explained that the modification was simple. The system was designed around an older energy distribution standard, I said. You were losing power because every subsystem was competing for priority. Mia crossed her arms. And you saw that immediately? Vey repaired worse. She looked at me for a long moment. Humans really are strange. Vey heard that before. The next problem appeared in their communications network. Valkyr 9 used encrypted battlefield communications, but their system depended on a central relay. If that relay failed, every warrior would lose tactical synchronization. I recommended a distributed backup network. Sarah listened. Can you build it? Yes. How long? 6 hours. She glanced at the technicians. They said 3 days. They rebuilding the entire system. And you? I am changing how it talks. She considered that. Do it. I worked through the night. Nobody ordered me to. I simply preferred finishing a problem once I had found it. By morning, the new system was operational. Sarah personally tested it. She moved through 3 separate signal dead zones while maintaining full communication with the unit. When she returned, she removed her helmet. It works. Yes. She looked at me. Why didn't T-Command assign you to engineering? I think they tried. Mia laughed quietly. This time, several others joined her. I smiled. For the first time since arriving, I didn't feel like an intruder. Then the emergency alarm sounded. Every display in the technical bay turned red. Sarah's expression changed instantly. Valkyr 9, she ordered, prepare for deployment. A tactical map appeared. 3 outer colonies had stopped responding. Then another signal disappeared. And another. The room went silent. The Kryn had arrived. The alarm changed everything. Valkyr 9 moved immediately. The laughter disappeared. Helmets sealed. Weapons locked, and tactical displays filled with information from the outer colonies. Commander Kane stood at the center of the room. Red Mesa has lost contact. A second marker vanished. Then Outpost 12. Another signal disappeared. Third colony is gone. I studied the map. The pattern bothered me. They aren't attacking randomly, I said. Nobody answered. I enlarged the tactical display. The missing colonies formed a curve around coalition territory. They moving toward something. Sarah looked at me. The fleet? No. Look at the spacing. I pointed toward the empty region between the colonies. They avoiding the military routes. Mia frowned. Why? Because those routes are monitored. I switched the map to civilian traffic. The pattern became obvious. They cutting supply lines first. Sarah's expression hardened. Kryn strategy? Probably. A communication officer turned from her console. Commander. Command has issued deployment orders. Sarah accepted the transmission. Valkyr 9 is being sent to Red Mesa. I looked at the map again. How long? 20 minutes until launch. Mia glanced at me. You coming? I looked at Sarah. She hesitated. Command lists you as technical support. I can help. You are not a combat specialist. I know. You could stay aboard. I shook my head. If their attack is disrupting systems, someone needs to see what they doing. Sarah studied me. Then she handed me a combat helmet. Stay behind the line. I will. And don't improvise. I looked at her. That depends on the situation. Mia laughed. Sarah did not. The transport launched 6 minutes later. Through the viewport, Atlas Prime disappeared behind us while Red Mesa appeared on the tactical display. Thousands of civilian signals were moving toward evacuation zones. Then they stopped. Every signal vanished at once. The cockpit became silent. Sarah stared at the display. What happened? I leaned forward. They jammed the colony. Mia checked her weapon. Then we already late. I watched the darkness ahead. No, I said quietly. We exactly where they want us. The transport entered Red Mesa's atmosphere under fire. Warning lights flashed across the cabin as defensive systems tracked incoming missiles. Sarah remained calm, issuing orders while the pilot rolled hard enough to make the entire transport groan. 2 minutes to surface. A missile crossed our path. The pilot barely avoided it. I checked the tactical display. Those aren't random attacks. Sarah looked over. What do you see? They forcing us toward the western sector. Mia frowned. There is no evacuation route there. Exactly. The transport shook again. Sarah immediately understood. Pilot, change course. The pilot adjusted the descent. Another missile appeared. This time it came from the opposite direction. I stared at the display. They hurting us. Sarah looked at me. Can you identify the launch sites? I connected my terminal to the transport's sensors. Give me 10 seconds. The system was partially jammed, but the modified communications network gave me access to fragments of the colony's remaining infrastructure. I followed the signal interruptions. There, a series of positions appeared. Kryn batteries are surrounding the main evacuation corridor. Mia cursed. Sarah didn't. How many? Too many for a direct assault. The pilot looked back. Commander, we losing engine power. I checked the readings. They hit the secondary power system. Sarah stood. Prepare for emergency landing. The transport descended toward a district already burning. Through the viewport, I saw civilians moving between damaged buildings. The main evacuation route was blocked. The Kryn had planned this carefully. They weren't trying to destroy Red Mesa. They were trying to trap everyone inside it. Our transport struck the ground hard. The rear ramp opened. Valkyr 9 moved out immediately. I followed. Stay behind us, Sarah ordered. I nodded. Then I noticed something. The colony map on my terminal contained old geological survey data. Beneath Red Mesa was an abandoned mining network. I zoomed in. There was a tunnel system running beneath the western district, connecting directly to the old spaceport. I looked toward Sarah. Commander. She turned. I found our evacuation route. Mia looked skeptical. Where? Underground. Sarah studied the map. Then she smiled faintly. Show us. For the first time, I realized something. The Kryn had planned for soldiers. They hadn't planned for an engineer. The entrance to the old mining tunnel was hidden beneath a collapsed storage depot. Sarah looked at the opening, then at me. How did you find this? Old geological records. Those records are 70 years out of date. They still accurate underground. Mia gave me a strange look. You sound very confident. I trust old maps more than new computers. She almost smiled. We entered the tunnel. The darkness swallowed the noise of the battle above us. Valkyr 9 moved in formation, weapons ready, while I walked behind Sarah with my terminal. The tunnel was narrow in places, but the Veyra adapted quickly. Their armor lights illuminated the walls as we advanced. After several minutes, we found the first civilians. They were hiding inside an abandoned maintenance chamber. When they saw Valkyr 9, several began crying. Sarah immediately organized them. How many? The colony administrator checked his tablet. 47 here. There are hundreds more scattered through the lower levels. We get them out. I studied the tunnel map. There's another problem. Sarah looked at me. The old mining network connects to the spaceport, but the central passage is blocked. Mia frowned. Can we clear it? Not safely. Then what's the alternative? I looked at the map. There is a ventilation shaft. Mia stared at me. How big? Too small for your armor. She looked offended. Then removed the armor. I blinked. You serious? Yes. Within minutes, Valkyr 9 began moving through the shaft. I stayed near the rear, guiding everyone around collapsed sections and unstable supports. Then the tunnel shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Sarah raised her weapon. Kryn? I checked the sensors. No. Another tremor followed. They detonated the entrance. Mia looked at me. Can they reach us? Not yet. I studied the map. Then I saw something I had missed. The mining network contained an emergency power station. If it still worked, we could open an old freight elevator leading directly to the spaceport. I moved toward it. Sarah followed. You, rethinking about doing something dangerous. Probably. You were told not to improvise. I remember. She sighed. Fine. Show me. We reached the power station. It was dead. I opened the control panel. The system was ancient, but the architecture was familiar. I smiled. Good. Sarah frowned. What? Old machines are easier. Then I connected my tools. The lights came on. The emergency power station came alive one section at a time. I waited for the final indicator to turn green. Then the old freight elevator groaned somewhere beneath us. Mia looked at me. You actually made it work. I was fairly confident. That is becoming annoying. We loaded the civilians into the elevator. Valkyr 9 formed a protective perimeter while I monitored the ancient control system. The elevator began rising. Then every light went red. I checked the display. Stop. Sarah immediately raised a hand. The elevator halted. What is it? She asked. Movement above us. Mia brought her rifle up. How many? I studied the damaged sensors. Enough. A metallic impact sounded overhead. Then another. The Kryn had found the elevator. Sarah looked at the civilians. How long until we can move? Maybe 30 seconds. We done. Have 30 seconds. I know. I opened the maintenance panel. The elevator shaft had an emergency bypass system. It was primitive, mechanical, and completely separate from the main controls. Exactly what I needed. I rerouted the power through the old mining grid. The elevator dropped suddenly. Several civilians screamed. Sarah grabbed the nearest support rail. What are you doing? Going down. How far? 3 levels. That wasn't in the plan. It is now. The elevator stopped violently. The doors opened into an abandoned loading tunnel. Move, Sarah ordered. Valkyr 9 rushed the civilians through the passage. I followed. Behind us, the elevator doors opened again. Kryn soldiers poured into the shaft. They had expected us above. Instead, they found an empty elevator and a dark tunnel. We reached the old spaceport 20 minutes later. Hundreds of civilians were waiting. The sight of Valkyr 9 emerging from beneath the colony caused a wave of stunned silence. Then everyone started moving. Transport after transport launched into the sky. By the time the final civilian ship escaped the atmosphere, Red Mesa's military network was collapsing. Sarah stood beside me on the surface. You saved them. I shook my head. The map did. She looked toward the departing ships. No. Her voice was quiet. The map didn't read itself. That was the first time Sarah Kane looked at me differently. Not as an accidental recruit. Not as a liability. As someone she intended to keep. The evacuation continued for another hour. By then, Red Mesa was no longer burning randomly. The fires had become concentrated around the military districts, where the Kryn were destroying anything they could not capture. Valkyr 9 received new orders. Fall back to the fleet, Sarah said. I looked toward the colony. How many civilians remain? Command estimates fewer than 300. Then we finished. Sarah stared at me. That is not our mission anymore. I know. I pointed toward my terminal. The colony's emergency network is still transmitting. Mia stepped closer. Transmitting what? Civilian distress signals. She looked at the display. There were dozens of them. Sarah's expression hardened. Going back. The warriors moved without hesitation. We entered the lower districts while the Kryn advanced from the opposite side. This time, they were expecting us. The first ambush came inside a ruined transit station. Valkyr 9 responded immediately. The fight lasted less than a minute. The Kryn were stronger than I expected, but the Veyra were faster. When the shooting stopped, Sarah looked at me. Route? I studied the colony grid. North. We moved. Every few minutes, another group of civilians joined us. Then the communications network failed completely. I stopped walking. Mia looked back. What? They lost the fleet. Sarah checked her own display. Jamming? No. I examined the signal. The Kryn have isolated the entire colony. Sarah understood. Cut off. I nodded. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in her expression. Then I noticed something else. A faint signal was coming from beneath the ground. I followed it through the old infrastructure map. It ISN, T-Kren. What is it? An emergency transmitter. Where? Under the Eastern Refinery. Mia sighed. Of course it is. We reached the refinery 20 minutes later. The transmitter was damaged but intact. I repaired the power connection and activated it. A response arrived almost immediately. Coalition fleet. Signal received. Sarah looked at me. Can you guide them here? I checked the map. Yes. Then another message appeared. Warning. Kren fleet approaching. I stared at the display. They found us. Sarah raised her weapon. How long? I watched the incoming coordinates. 7 minutes. Nobody spoke. Then Sarah looked at me. Jake, what do you have? I looked at the refinery schematics. A bad idea. Mia smiled. Good. I opened the map. Then we should start. I had 7 minutes. The refinery schematics displayed dozens of old industrial systems, most of them useless. Fuel lines, storage tanks, maintenance tunnels, ventilation shafts. Then I noticed the main coolant network. Sarah. She came beside me. What? The refinery has an emergency cooling system. So, if I overload it, the pressure will rise throughout the northern fuel lines. Mia looked at the map. And? The Kren are approaching from the north. Sarah understood immediately. You want to use the refinery as a weapon. Not exactly. I pointed toward the abandoned storage tanks. I want to make them think we're hiding there. Sarah studied the plan. How? I connected my terminal to the transmitter and redirected its signal through the refinery's old communication grid. Then I activated several dormant systems. The refinery began broadcasting dozens of false signals. Mia looked at me. They think we surrounded. They think we preparing to escape. And when they attack, I smiled slightly. They be standing exactly where I want them. Sarah gave the order. Everyone to the western tunnel. We moved quickly. The civilians were sent ahead while Valkyr 9 covered the retreat. I stayed behind for another 30 seconds. Sarah turned. Jake, catch up. That wasn't an invitation to stay. I know. She disappeared into the tunnel. I finished the final connection and ran. The first Kren ships entered the refinery district. Their sensors immediately detected the false signals. They fired. Missiles struck the storage complex. The old fuel tanks ignited. Then the emergency cooling system activated. Pressure surged through the buried pipes. I reached the tunnel entrance as the refinery exploded behind us. The blast rolled across Red Mesa. Mia looked back. You didn't mention it would be that large. I wasn't certain. Sarah stared at me. You weren't certain? No. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then the fleet signal returned. Coalition reinforcements arriving. I looked at the burning refinery. The Kren fleet was still approaching. But now their formation was broken. Their sensors were confused. And Valkyr 9 was already moving toward the evacuation corridor. Sarah looked at me. Jake, yes? Stay close. I nodded. For the first time, she didn't say it because she was protecting me. She said it because she wanted me beside the unit. We reached the evacuation corridor just as the coalition fleet entered the system. For a moment, I thought we were safe. Then the tactical display changed. Dozens of Kren ships were turning toward us. They ignoring the fleet, Sarah said. I studied their formation. No, they trying to cut off the civilians. Mia looked toward the transports. How many ships? 23. Sarah raised her weapon. Valkyr 9, defensive formation. The warriors moved around the evacuation ships. I checked my terminal. Something was wrong. The Kren weren't attacking. They were positioning themselves. They waiting. For what? Sarah asked. I zoomed in on the tactical map. Navigation interference. The moment I said it, every transport signal disappeared. The Kren had activated a jamming field. Sarah looked at me. Can you restore navigation? Not from here. Then what do we do? I examined the colony infrastructure. The old mining network connected to the orbital launch control system. I remembered the abandoned power station. If I reach the launch tower, I can bypass the jamming. Sarah immediately shook her head. It's inside the Kryn perimeter. I know. You, not going alone. I wasn't planning to. Mia stepped forward. Go. Sarah nodded. We moved through the ruined district while the rest of Valkyr 9 protected the civilians. The Kryn had occupied the streets. We avoided them whenever possible. When we couldn't, Mia dealt with them quickly. I reached the launch tower and found the control room almost intact. Almost. The primary console was destroyed. I opened the secondary panel. Give me a minute. You have 30 seconds, Mia said. I connected my tools. The system rejected my access. I tried again. Nothing. Then I noticed the emergency interface. It wasn't digital. It was mechanical. I smiled. What? Old machines. I pulled the manual release. The tower's systems activated. Navigation signals returned. One by one, the evacuation ships appeared on my display. Sarah's voice came through the restored network. Jake, we have them. I watched the transports accelerate toward orbit. Then the tower shook. Mia looked outside. A Kryn assault force was approaching. They here. I closed my equipment case. Then we should leave. We ran. Behind us, the tower collapsed under enemy fire. But the civilians were already in space. And for the first time, Valkyr 9 had accomplished something the Kryn had not expected. We had escaped their trap. We returned to Atlas Prime 6 hours later. The mission report called Red Mesa a successful evacuation. That was not how it felt to me. We had saved the civilians, but the Kryn had learned something important. They knew Valkyr 9 could adapt. They knew our systems had been modified. More importantly, they knew there was a human inside the unit. The moment we entered the tactical center, 3 officers approached Sarah. Commander, command wants Miller. Sarah looked at me. Why? They want a full technical report. I followed them into the briefing room. The report took nearly an hour. I explained the mining network, the refinery trap, the navigation bypass, and the communications modifications. Nobody interrupted. When I finished, an older coalition officer leaned forward. You accomplished all this with standard equipment? Mostly. And you weren't trained specifically for battlefield engineering? No. He exchanged a glance with another officer. Then he asked the question I had expected. Why didn't you request extraction? I thought about it. Because Valkyr 9 was still there. The room became quiet. The officer looked toward Sarah. You approve of this? Sarah folded her arms. He kept my unit alive. That wasn't the question. It is my answer. When I returned to the barracks, the warriors treated me differently. Mia handed me a drink without saying anything. Another warrior moved her equipment aside so I could use the technical console. Someone had even placed a spare chair beside Sarah's command station. I sat down. Mia looked at me. You know they going to keep asking for your help. I noticed. That's because you useful. I thought I was weak. She smiled. You are. I looked at her. She continued. Compared with us. Then she walked away. I almost laughed. The next morning, Command issued another deployment order. This time, Valkyr 9 was being sent to protect a strategic military installation near the edge of Coalition space. Atlas Prime's defense network was already under review. Nobody knew it yet, but the Kryn had changed their objective. They were no longer attacking colonies. They were moving toward us. And 3 days later, the first enemy fleet appeared on our sensors. Their destination was Atlas Prime. The Kryn fleet reached Atlas Prime before the Coalition could assemble a proper defense. Thousands of ships emerged from faster-than-light space around the station, spreading across the tactical display like a dark cloud. The command center erupted into controlled activity. Sarah received her orders immediately. Valkyr 9 is assigned to Defense Sector 4. She looked at me. You stay in the technical zone. I nodded. For once, I had no argument. I was not a frontline fighter. I understood that, but as I reached the technical sector, I noticed something on the station's defense network. One reactor was showing an abnormal power fluctuation. I opened the diagnostic panel. The station had 3 primary defense reactors. 2 were operating normally. The third was slowly losing synchronization. I checked the system logs. Someone had changed the distribution protocol. Not the CRIN. The error had been there for years. I stared at the display. The station's automated defense grid was preparing to shut down Reactor 3 if its output exceeded a safety threshold. That would happen in approximately 6 minutes. I contacted Sarah. Commander. Her voice came through immediately. I am busy. Your defense grid has a problem. Can it wait? No. She was silent. What kind of problem? Reactor 3 is going to shut itself down. How long? 5 minutes. Can you fix it? Yes. Then fix it. I ran toward the reactor control room. The corridor shook as the first CRIN weapons struck the station. Emergency lights activated. Technicians were evacuating. I continued. When I reached the reactor chamber, the main console was already displaying a shutdown warning. I opened the manual access panel. The problem was worse than I expected. The reactor wasn't simply overheating. The defense network was drawing power unevenly. If I corrected the distribution manually, I could stabilize the reactor. But the system would need to be restarted from inside the containment chamber. That meant entering the reactor room. I looked through the reinforced window. Blue-white energy moved beneath the floor. The chamber was not designed for human workers. I checked the emergency suit. Then I heard Sarah over the communicator. Jake, status? I am going inside. No, I have to. That's an order. I sealed my helmet. Then you, have to give me a better one. I entered the chamber. The heat rose immediately. Warning indicators appeared across my visor. I moved toward the manual controls. Outside, Atlas Prime shook again. The CRIN fleet had begun its main assault. I reached the reactor controls. One switch remained locked. I pulled the emergency release. The entire chamber went dark. Then the reactor restarted. Across Atlas Prime, millions of defense systems came online. And something on the tactical display changed. The station's weapons were no longer firing individually. They were synchronizing. The defense grid came alive. Across the tactical display, Atlas Prime's weapons synchronized into a single network. Hundreds of defense platforms rotated toward the approaching CRIN fleet. Then they fired. The first wave of enemy ships disappeared behind a wall of energy. I watched from the reactor chamber as the station shook around me. My visor displayed rising temperatures. I had perhaps 3 minutes before the reactor became unstable again. I opened the secondary control panel. The defense grid was drawing too much power. If I left it alone, the reactor would overload. I contacted Sarah. Commander, the grid is going to burn through the reactor. How long? 2 minutes. Can you stop it? Yes, do it. I changed the distribution sequence. Nothing happened. The system rejected the command. I tried again. Still nothing. Then I noticed the problem. The old defense protocol required a manual synchronization from the primary reactor. I looked at the controls. The primary reactor was behind me. The secondary systems were already failing. There was only one option. I disconnected the safety limiter. Every warning on my visor turned red. The reactor output climbed. Outside, Atlas Prime's weapons fired again. The CRIN fleet began collapsing. Ships that had expected an easy victory were suddenly surrounded by concentrated defensive fire. I pushed the final control into place. The reactor screamed. Then the energy stabilized. I exhaled. Sarah, no response. I checked the communicator. Dead. The electromagnetic surge had disabled every local system. I looked toward the observation window. The station's entire defense network was glowing. Then the pulse expanded. It passed through the station. It passed through the surrounding space. The CRIN ships stopped. One by one, their engines failed. Their weapons went dark. Their shields disappeared. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then Atlas Prime's remaining batteries opened fire. The battle ended almost immediately. I stood inside the reactor chamber, watching the enemy fleet drift helplessly outside. The emergency door opened. Sarah stood there. Her armor was damaged, and blood ran from a cut above her eye. She stared at me. "What did you do?" I looked at the reactor. "I restarted it." She shook her head slowly. "No." She looked through the window at the disabled Kryn fleet. "You just saved Atlas Prime." I had no answer. For the first time, I realized the entire station was silent. Every surviving soldier was looking toward the reactor chamber. And somewhere beyond Atlas Prime, across Coalition space, the story of the human who had arrived in Valkyr 9 by mistake had already begun to spread. The battle ended before the Coalition fleet could fully understand what had happened. The Kryn ships were disabled. Atlas Prime remained intact. Thousands of soldiers were alive because one reactor had been restarted at the right moment. For the next several days, my name appeared in reports across Coalition space. Some called me a hero. I didn't feel like one. I had simply noticed a problem and fixed it. Command eventually decided I should return to the Human Engineering Corps. Sarah objected. So did Valkyr 9. When Command asked me where I wanted to serve, I already knew the answer. I'll stay with Valkyr 9. Nobody celebrated. Veyra warriors weren't particularly good at that. Instead, Mia quietly handed me a new unit insignia. Months passed. Human engineers began exchanging technology with the Veyra. Our communication systems improved. Their armor became more efficient. Other Coalition species stopped describing humanity as weak. They started describing us as unpredictable. That was probably more accurate. Valkyr 9 became one of the Coalition's most effective units. And I became very familiar with a problem I had never expected. Everyone wanted my help. One afternoon, I was repairing a damaged fighter when 6 Veyra warriors began arguing behind me about who had requested me first. Sarah watched from across the hangar. I looked at her. "Do you want me to fix this later?" She smiled. "No, Jake, finish it." I returned to the engine. Years earlier, I had arrived at Valkyr 9 because someone in Personnel Command had made a mistake. Sarah had once called me a liability. Now she understood something the rest of the galaxy was only beginning to learn. Humans were not always dangerous because they were stronger. Sometimes they were dangerous because they noticed what everyone else ignored. And sometimes the greatest mistake the galaxy could make was putting the wrong human in the wrong place. Because if that human happened to be Jake Miller, the mistake might save you.